All right, hello everyone. Here we are back for another Golf Clash tutorial here. And what we're going to do is a part 2 for Tour 10 coming up. So the first thing that you'll see is I just kind of set my bag up. You can see how I have it set up for this tour. Spitfire at 1. Try to keep it out of the sand. There's not a lot of fairway bunkers for this tour, and not a lot of length to this tour. There's a little bit of length to this tour, so you can probably get away with Malibu in this one. A lot of times I'll make the switch at Spitfire 1, but I don't even expect to be playing from the sand on this entire guide. So with that being said, I'm not even going to make the switch. So let's just jump right in. If you guys do need a little bit more club selection advice, do check out part 1, because I went over the balls and the clubs as to why I was kind of setting up the bag the way that I am. And that's what you'll want to be using. I'd much rather just kind of get into the holes here and give you guys as many holes as possible. So a lot of different ways that I'm going to play this. What I might do on this one is more of maybe just like some kind of hook shot. I'm going to play the wind first. So I expect the ball to kind of, I'm playing off the left of my bullseye, but I expect it to be landing towards my bullseye here. So, I'm just trying to essentially get a starting point for where I want to go and land, which is right around the target. And I'm probably only going to go maybe about 7-ish rings, I'm thinking. Very, very little. Very, very little for this hook. Now, didn't expect it to land that long. So that kind of changes things. I thought for sure that ball was going to, and it looks like I still went, even with about 6-7 rings there, it was probably still too much. You can see that the angle, it wasn't quite coming back. I didn't expect it to be able to land up here. I'm not sure why it did, because you can see this is, into the wind significantly. I did not expect it to be able to land long like that. But for whatever reason, it did land kind of like right in about here, which was past this fairway. I expected it to land right over it, a little bit less. But I would have also liked to have got that over probably about 2 more rings to the left. So I probably should have undercorrected that just 2 more rings. It's very, very tough to play hook shots into the wind, side wind, and factoring in all those things is very, very tough because they all play different. That's one of the reasons that there's no ring guide in the notebook tool, is because whether it's a headwind, whether it's a tailwind, whether it's a side wind, all those different winds matter. And they're not going to play the same. So what we're going to focus on pretty much in scenarios like this is just getting the ball in play. You'll see that, we're kind of maybe mid-club on a Goliath. And one of the good attributes about this, it does have a substantial amount of curl. You see, I'll maybe go right around about 2.5 rings here, and you'll see, hopefully with all this curl that I do have, I can just kind of aggressively land on the right edge and just get it up here onto the green. So this was a challenging wind. There's a couple different ways I could have done it. I could have done it without a hook. However, the fear of kind of rolling into the rough, I would have probably been kind of where my opponent is, maybe just a little bit closer, had I not gone for a hook shot. So it looks like he actually hit the tree there. So something you'll want to be careful of when you're moving around the trees. Make sure that you're being careful especially with the branches and whatnot. It looks like in that case, he just hit the side of the tree. So going to be holdable from down there. Going to be tricky though. Very, very tricky. You'll want to just try to land maybe right on the fringe, I would say. It's really hard to land on the green, so you'd kind of have to pick the fringe. Getting too low makes it just a little bit harder to kind of hold the line, so it's probably best that you just try to get it on the fringe in this situation as opposed to pulling down here. Because when you bounce here, that means the second bounce is going to land up on maybe on the fringe and not on the green. And the more bounces that you put off the green, the harder something is actually to make it. But here you can see kind of lucked into this one and picked up the win there. Unlucky break for the opponent, running the ball into the tree there. So let's keep going here. Tour 10. Figure typically I can play at least 10 holes for you guys, so one of the things I might do, just try to get live opponents. So if it's ever spinning for a while, just back out after say 20 seconds. If you want to play live people. As long as your trophy count makes sense for the tour, it'll be easy to match live people. For instance, if I had this many trophies, I tried to go into a Tour 9, Tour 8 game right now. Chances of me playing a live player are going to be very, very low. However, in a Tour appropriate, I should have this many trophies for Tour 10. It'll be easy to match Tour 10. So here you can see straight into the wind. This makes this hole significantly tougher when you get a wind like this, because ideally what you want to do is get this as far into that fairway gully as you can. You want to get this significantly down there. Well, it's really, really tough to do that when you get a wind like this. So you'll often see maybe a little bit shorter drive, kind of like where my opponent is, and depending on the wind, you know, we might have to kind of go into overpower on the second shot as well. Now, what I'm going to do, you know, just to get kind of a general idea, 4.5 rings kind of back more or less. What I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm not kind of overextending myself here. So I'm not going to use full overpower because I really need to focus on precision, especially when you're using things like extra miles. So I'm going to kind of curl it back with, mostly for wind effect here. And you can see I'm able to get perfect ball. And I'm just kind of going orange because I want to be very, very careful. And I don't expect to be able to get it up far enough where I could roll into the left rough. So I just want to focus on getting it into play, not playing too aggressive just in case I get a great ball to the right, for example. But we got a straight tailwind anyway, so that's going to make things significantly easier for us. But as I mentioned, you might need to go into as much as full overpower when you get a win like that off the tee, because you really do want to get it just a little bit more aggressive into that neck there. It makes the shot, a little bit more safe. You can see my opponent here has big dog. That means if we do get to a shootout hole where we have to use a wood, I'm going to have an extreme advantage. There's no benefit to using this club essentially whatsoever. He's going to win so few holes because he gets to the green and I don't. It's just not a very common occurrence. So because of that fact, it's much better to be thinking about your shootouts than the alternative. So here you can see we were able to get to the fairway. Only a 5 wind. We're going to be pulling back from max. So anytime you're pulling back from max, what you'll want to do is you'll want to use a position that's not at max. So thinking somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 88%, 6. However, I do believe this might just be a tiny bit uphill, yeah. So maybe 6.2-ish rings, somewhere in that effect. And aside from that, I'm thinking maybe about 3 topspin. Try to land somewhere around here. Kind of had to wing that a little bit. As you can see, I'm getting tight on time. It's much better to be safe than sorry. So I didn't get to quite be as precise. And plus with the great ball, you can see that it just shoots out towards the right. Perfect ball, I had a chance to be able to get that hole out. But you can see that I was a little bit off with my alignment. I probably was at maybe like, half or a third of a ring off with my original positioning. So I tried to make sure that I under adjusted, probably only went about what looked like maybe 5.7-ish rings. However, since I was, kind of a little bit off on my original, it probably accounted for about a half a ring. So let's take a look at the shootout here. Maple Bay, new hole. As I mentioned, especially with great balls. So if my opponent makes a great ball here, there's a good chance if he hits it anywhere near the hole that his wind effect was just, significantly off. What I typically play on this hole is plus 5%. Other than that, we're just going to have to focus on ball guide offset. It's going to be a huge contributing factor here for this hole. Another thing I can do is I can set my wind ahead of time. The only thing that you'll need to do is you'll need to go double check it. I'll still need to go in there and actually check it. But if I set the direction, that means I won't have to touch it. So perfect ball. It looks like it's sliding in just a little bit under on the wind effect. So you can see with being 1.8-ish yards, especially with a sniper, very good chance for me to take this victory. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to try to find a spin and ball guide offset that gives you kind of something that looks maybe just a little bit short of the hole and a little bit to the right of the hole. So you can see with kind of where I am, and I do believe that I'm kind of somewhere in the middle here, more or less. So I'm thinking maybe 70-ish 5% club. So 7.6 rings here. Perfect ball. And as I mentioned, I'm able to just slide it in and actually hit kind of a perfect shot. Much easier to play with a sniper than it is a big dog. There's no value to playing with the big dog in tours like this. A lot of times what you'll see that I try to do is I try to make up for difference. If I absolutely have to, I may pull out a bigger ball. Alternatively, if somebody really wants to win that much that they're, trying to go win 5 balls and do all this crazy stuff in tour, I'll just let them have it. I don't care. I mean, if I can, I typically, especially in Tour 10, I usually average somewhere around 70-75% of the games I win. So if I just give people a couple of them, it really doesn't change much. I'll still get through the tour. So that's what I recommend more than anything, is just trying to master that ball guide offset and, landing zone, spins, all this important information. And if you can start to master that stuff, that's how you become a better player and close out tours much, much easier. As I mentioned, bare minimum, I can easily get through this tour 70, 75% of my games every time. There's been times that I've gone through it and I've maxed the tour without a loss. When they put Port Hello in here, Port Hello was in Tour 10 for that week of the Summer Major when they first introduced that course. I was able to win like 52 out of like 54 games just because nobody could play the wind effect and the huge elevation drop-offs and stuff like that. So, that's what I recommend, is just trying to master the concepts as opposed to trying to do like, a whole bunch of crazy stuff. So let's take a look here. 3 rings down. Looks like I won't need much power. Just trying to get an idea of what it's going to look like. Very, very little on the power. You might just see me curl it just to kind of play wind effect. And you can see that I'm also maybe just slightly overpowering it. Just very, like almost the needle didn't even change colors. Just trying to make sure that it hops over that bunker. I should be good with only 2.5 topspin that I can get it to stop. Now this pitch is very, very tough. And it's even tougher when we have angled wind. So here's actually a headwind. This might actually help because this pitch is brutally tough. I've been playing a severe overplay on this hole in the tournament. Let's take a look. I'm thinking well, I don't need to even put in the wind yet, but I'm just going to kind of use my wind arrow and get it set ahead of time to kind of save me some seconds. Another thing that you'll see maybe with a wind like this, instead of me using full backspin, I'll probably only use 8 bars. And I'm also not going to play the fairway. This might be the only time where playing the fairway is kind of acceptable. However, I still think it's going to be a very, very tough shot to make. So I'm still not going to do it. It's going to be very, very hard to get this there and keep it on line. You can see the fairway is very jacked. So you can see more so than anything, my opponent just kind of missed because of that fact. So first thing that I'll do is I'll try to test the range. You can see I'll probably be pulling up at least until mid. So, I need to make sure that I'm kind of factoring that in. I'm going to go at least 5.5 rings. I may even go 6 just because of, as I mentioned, about the wind effect. And also I'm going to back off. You can see maybe I'm using 8.5 bars. So you can see with what I'm doing with my ball guide. And aside from that, maybe 6-ish rings or maybe just a little bit more than 6, just as I was mentioning. Oh boy. I don't think that great ball is going to work. So there you can see it slide off to the left, but you can see I might have even needed more than that. So, you do have to be thinking about the way that your ball guide is offset. So if you're not going to offset it, which is kind of like what I didn't do, you might need to use some kind of percentage overplay to make sure that you kind of, can factor in the wind effect. So in that scenario, maybe plus 10%. When the side winds, it's significant. I've been using maybe 25%. It's very, very dramatic because there's so much ball guide change. Instead of changing, north and south like that wind does, it's changing east and west, which just intensifies wind effect in terms of how much you need to overcorrect because of the fact that the direction that it's messing with the most is east and west components instead of north and south. And what that does is it sends your ball more left and right offline than what that does on that one. Looks like we're getting this hole again. Again, as I mentioned, plus 5% sniper. Let's go ahead and set in my wind as well. Wind somewhere in the effect of maybe that direction. Again, as I was mentioning, the player with the best wind effect is typically the player that's going to win these. And, I was hoping to get some of these new holes because it's good to see, some fresh perspective on my channel. What you're typically going to do with the notebook tool, as I mentioned, +5 for every wind. You'll just have to, aside from that, just master the ball guide offset. So this looks pretty good. Oh, just a little bit bad with the speed, but that's pretty good. But it's also going to be very, very beatable. So let's kind of go over things here for you guys. What I'll typically do on winds like this is I will start to come over in this spot a little bit. You'll see that I might be pulling up to maybe 70–80% or something like that. So I'm thinking somewhere up in here with the slider, 70-some%. Aside from that, we'll just use ball guide offset. You can see that my opponent was just a little bit long with the way that they came through. What I'm going to try to do is maybe right about here, maybe just a little bit more on the backspin. Right in here. Oh no, I came up just a little bit short. I should have kept it. Yep, I ended up losing the shootout, and I had a very good line. It was chance for hole-in-one. Again, it's going to be about wind effect. So you can see my ball just comes up. You can see that I changed the spin at the last second. I should have just trusted my line. I saw my opponent roll through and just got a little too greedy with the way that I wanted to play it. If I would have been going first, I probably would have been all over that. I actually was, in the middle of the process of that, I was basically using what my opponent did as my justification as to why to pull back at the very last second there. Something I shouldn't have done. Should have just trusted it. So let's take a look here. A little bit different wind scenario. Same thing's going to kind of apply. You can punch this in, get an idea. You can see that I stretch the arrow out just to kind of see where this landing spot is. I expect it to land somewhere up in here. With this one, you'll see that I won't even really need curl here or anything. I'm just going to kind of set this in and use that side spin to get it up where I need to. So again, I also, backed off the top spin because you'll see a little bit more wind. So the amount of top spin that I put is a little bit less. Okay. So let's see if we can't get this pitch here. I think I might have had it last time if I would have had my perfect ball. But, it is nice to kind of see the different perspectives, the little bit different winds, a little bit of different intensities, because you can see the way that I changed the curl. You can see the way that I changed the top spin. All these things are things that I'm thinking about every time I set up a shot. So I can't just go in and say, oh, I'm going to do what Zach does, use two top spin no matter what. That's not the way it works. Another thing you can do is you could essentially, especially if you had really good clubs, you could get aggressive here and you could go for the green. It's risky, but it could be done. Can be done. So here with this wind, you'll see that I'll definitely crank this up. You'll also see that I'm going to be pulling down towards min a bit. You also see that the wind's a little bit smaller. So I might just kind of, I'll be pulling down towards min, maybe 25% club. And I might do just a +5% this time because the wind's smaller. And keep in mind that I'm only doing that for an overplay. Other than that, I'm going to try to bend it just around the pin. So you'll see that I try to put just a little bit of side spin. You'll see with the way that I have my guide set up as well. Right around 3 rings here. Perfect ball. And sure enough, right into the cup this time. Probably had both of those, so I pretty much threw away a game with that great ball on the last hole. I still should have won the shootout on that last one. Again, as I mentioned, I probably played my opponent too much on that. I saw his mistake, what I was going to do. I didn't trust it. So, you know, sometimes it does have advantages to go first. Just because, you know, watching his mistake, it just kind of changed the way that I was going to play the shot. I changed my spin last minute, and it ended up coming up 3 yards short because of half an extra bar. So, but here you can see, you know, an opportunity that you're going to be able to take advantage of. Keep in mind, you know, about that overplay. It's more about the ball guide offset and the way that the ball guide is expanding in that case. The very first one was more of a compression. So that's kind of the typical reason as to why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. $12.38, that's probably about the, almost coming up on the half-hour point here. Gokasho number 4. Oh, wow, that's an interesting wind. A couple different ways to go about doing this one. The wind gets up large enough, you could essentially, you know, point over towards the green and get yourself a pitch, especially with my opponent playing a marlin for whatever reason. This is a very, very tough tour to get away with marlins. However, this is a good hole to get away with a marlin because you can see that it's very, very short. However, it really puts yourself at a disadvantage, especially when you're playing experienced opponents on the shootouts. You know, the best justification that I can give you guys is always assume that you're playing a really good player. Even if it might not look so, you just might want to, because you really don't know how they're going to play the shot and whether or not they know things that they know to potentially, you know, really beat you. So it's what I do is I try to save my kingmakers for this tour. This is the very first tour that I start to use them. And I pretty much use them exclusively in 10, 11, and 12 just to make my life just a little bit easier. You can see I don't really need to get very long off the tee here. I just try to get kind of up to the corner. This is pretty much all I try to do. As long as I get to the corner there, we should be in range to where I can position up here and play some kind of topspin shot. So let's take a look here. We'll be pulling up towards max a bit. It is a little bit maybe downhill in the landing zone. Very, very subtly, though. It's not going to be very much. I'm thinking about pulling somewhere up in here. I'm going to use this fairway spot down here. What I'll typically do is maybe just a little bit of backspin. A little bit of ball guide offset. 7.3-ish rings or so. Not very good there. Very, very tough very, very tough hole. I mean, you're landing on a side, like a side hill, downhill. Very tough to keep the ball on line going down that hill. If you have everything perfect, that's, you know, you can get away with it, but you can also just have those moments that it's just like, I mean, where the hell did that ball go? I mean, literally, I mean, if you go 7, 8 rings and miss like you went 12, it doesn't really make sense. But, you know, it's just kind of because the fairway's kind of tilted sideways, and, you know, you just want to be very, very careful when you're doing adjustments like that, because it's very, very tough to hold your line. But let's go in, take a look at the shootout here. Brand new hole. Tough wind. This is a tough wind for me. It's probably best case scenario for my opponent. Pretty much the best case scenario that you could ask for. So what I'm thinking is maybe somewhere around here. I'm going to use this 6. I don't really use elevation on this hole. So I'll be pulling away from max a bit. 5, 6 rings, somewhere like that. Not only did my opponent get a very good wind to basically, have natural wind effect to bring it down towards the hole. It's a very, very tough wind for me to play my rough bump. This is pretty much the hardest wind to play the rough bump. You can still do it, but that's what I would recommend for my opponent, would be doing the rough bump. It's going to be very, very tough for a 15-mile-per-hour wind. But that's what I would do if it was me. And because you have a power 0 ball, you'd still be able to do it. You'd probably need to use, with a wind like this, maybe about half curl. And, just use the notebook numbers for your ring play. As I mentioned, this should have pretty good natural wind effect. He doesn't really need to curl it or anything. So it was a very good wind to set up, a chance for my opponent in that situation. But as I mentioned, it just makes it a little bit easier coming in with kingmakers. Like I said, never assume. I actually assume that probably my opponent is probably, if you have enough confidence to go into Tour 10 with Marlins, that means that you can win Tour 10 with Marlins. Okay, so that means you at least have a good idea of what you're doing. However, when you try to go up against an equal opponent and they have better wind resistance than you, that's where you run into the problems, because a lot of shootouts come down to fractions of yards, and it's just that much easier to hit it just fractionally closer with 20% extra wind reduction. So let's take a look here. Gokasho 4 again. Different perspective, I guess. We'll try to put together another video. So what I'm going to try to do is hopefully get a situation where I can play a little bit different shot. I'll show you kind of the other shot that I like to play on this hole, if we can get the wind for it. So 6.4. I'm going to get just a little bit more aggressive on this drive, just slightly, not very much. 3 rings. Slight curl maybe. So you'll see, 3.5 rings I'm putting out towards the side. Just a slight on the curl. Didn't want that great ball. Let's hope I didn't get too aggressive. I don't think I did. Yeah, I'm good. So what I'll typically try to do is maybe, sometimes get it. It's really just dependent upon, the wind. That's a little bit farther than I like to drive it. But what I like to do sometimes is put it up here on the top of the fairway, and it's a little bit easier to control. However, this is a tough wind for this shot. I'm still going to attempt it, don't get me wrong. But as I mentioned, this is a very, very challenging wind to be able to go for this spot right here. Not in the effect of actually pulling it off, it's just hard to make. It's going to be hard to make this shot because the same problem about landing on that other fairway that you just saw me hit, it still plays here as well. You're landing on a kind of an upslope. Well, no, typically you land on the downslope and then the green goes into an upslope. So it's also still very, very tough to hold this. And this isn't the easiest wind either for it. So I'll be pulling down towards min a bit, so maybe 1 per ring, I'm thinking. Other than that, it's just going to be playing the wind effect. I like to play about 4 backspin typically, so I might crank it up to 4.5 here. Other than that, as I mentioned, I'm just going to try to play some of this ball guide offset. Try to figure out the line just a little bit. 9.7 rings. I expect it to kind of launch just a little bit, because I am moving up to higher ground. Probably going to end up shooting this out towards the left. Maybe not. Nope, it looks like still maybe just a little bit of a fraction of an overplay there. It's very, very tough when you land on, downslope, side tails, stuff like that, because any fractional change in your land zone, it can completely change the complexion of the shot. It doesn't, necessarily roll out the way that you think it's going to when you end up changing that land zone. Too different, and not to mention the second hop changes. All these changes hop differently. And when you have a downslope and then a green that's an upslope, you're kind of hitting into 2 different type surfaces. It's very, very challenging to get this hole online. It's a very, very tough hole to make. It almost requires, kind of easier wins per se, or alternatively to easier wins would be, just something that's a little bit more fixed in terms of the direction, like straight down or straight into the face, or tournament win, for example. It's still very tough to make in the tournaments as well. So let's take a look at this hole. This is actually kind of one of my least favorite winds for this hole. This is a very, very challenging wind. What I typically like to do, I like to go left here. This wind almost forces me right. And that's one of the biggest problems that I have with it, because I don't like to do this shot. I think I have an advantage when I can land to the left. I think I have an advantage when I can do the rough hop in front of the green. However, when I have to hit this shot, I think it's a little bit more of a coin flip. There is still some strategy to executing. There's no question about that. There's still some strategy to executing. Now, what I'm going to do, plus 5%, and I'm thinking, down towards the min number. You'll see that I'll be pulling very, very close to min here. What I'm going to try to do, I'm going to try to just kind of play it right around here and just try to let the wind effect take it up into the hill. As I mentioned, I'm going to play the min club here. And it looks pretty good. As I mentioned, there is some strategy, and you can see, kind of the way that I'm playing it is kind of the strategy. You can see it points towards the hole. However, one thing you have very little control is how much it rolls out by. So you can see I got it to 3.7, or 3.27. I could lose to 3.25. It could just be one of those holes where it's a little bit more of a coin slip. What you want to do is you want to try to keep it kind of low on that hill and just try to let it kind of feed down there. But I don't like to do it that way because you have less control of the ball. When I bring it in from the left and curl it back, you're kind of going against the grain up the slope, and you can a lot of times get it to drift back towards the hole to only a yard or 2, if you have good distance control. So I do like to go left there. Alternatively, I'd like a wind where I can go at the rough bump easily as well. With that wind, I pretty much am kind of forced to play the right side shot, and that's my least favorite shot to play on that hole. So you just got my worst case scenario type play for that hole, because I don't like to do that one. Oh well, so this is very, very similar wind to something that we've already done. Now, what I expect is probably the ball to, we can use the wind tool here, E-dish rings. It's going to land significantly down. You'll want to be a little bit cautious. So that's, 4 rings down plus a little bit more. You'll see that it's going to be just a little bit short of the bunker here. So I'm just going to kind of short hit it just a little bit. Just try to be very, very safe with the way that I'm going about doing this, because I know that it's going to just kind of launch down there. You can see I'm only going to use about 1 top spin. So you'll just want to use, I might have been on the wrong club. So it might not have been 8 rings. It might have been probably more like 5 or 6 rings that it was probably flying down. But nevertheless, I kind of knew that it's going to be launching down and the ball guide's going to be expanding. And you can see that I'm backing off that top spin to make sure that it doesn't roll through. So I don't know what the second wind is going to be. You can see my opponent looks like he may be doing this aggressive approach. So this will be interesting to see. Probably don't want to do it with a season 6 ball. I'd probably recommend trying this with a berserker ball. Much easier to pull off. You can see that needle is out of control as well. Looks like he probably hit it pretty solid. Let's just see how it plays out though. This is going straight in the water. So it is going to be a risky shot, as you can see. And that's one of the reasons that I was mentioning berserker ball. So Min's down there. Maybe 60% club. And again, we're probably going to need some kind of overplay, so I might even pull up just a little bit, maybe 10% extra as well, 10% plus pulling extra on the slider. Thinking somewhere around here maybe. You can see that I'm also keeping the ball guide through the hole significantly here. So 7.6, somewhere in here. And it's very, very tough when you bring it in from the right side, because you can see that the ball actually rolls right down the hill. So what you need to try to do is you need to try to bring it back up the hill. It usually requires some side spin. Since I had a left pointed wind, I was trying to play the wind effect and get it to kind of go back up the hill. But as I mentioned, very tough to come in from the right side of the pin. That's what I've been doing this tournament, and it is very tough. Anytime you bring it in from the left, it's much easier to make. But it's also hard with winds like this to bring it in from the left, because it's hard to get the ball to, not come straight back or come back towards the left. If you come in from the left of the pin and you have wind effect going to the left, it's probably going to come back straight towards the hole, or even more towards the left. So how are you going to get it on line correctly? You almost have to play it towards the right of the pin there. So probably coming up right around 45 minutes now. Just go ahead and tap this in real quick. This is probably the first time that this account is going to go over 3,900 trophies as well. 3,900 is, you know, as of now in the game, it's pretty much around where you start to see Apocalypse in the shop. The Tour 7s, they start coming more in tour chests as well, I notice. So there's been quite a few accounts that as soon as I hit this marker, you actually start getting them in chests a lot more as well. There's been one account that I brought up where I didn't have a POC unlocked until I got the 3,900. And then as soon as I got the 3,900, it came in like within like 20 to 50 chests. Like it just pretty much, I ended up, everything that I didn't have unlocked just almost auto unlocked in like 50 chests from just, you know, bulk opening these screens on these chests on the screen once you get over that hurdle. Now the only thing that is, you might have to stay above. So if you fall back down, you probably need to get back up. So I do believe this is the first time that this account is probably up this high, though, would be my guess. I don't know how it would have gotten there otherwise, because when we took this over here, this account, I'm pretty sure that it was maybe 3,000, 3,200, somewhere in there. Now, what I'll typically maybe try to do with wins like this is maybe try to go over here. Now, I do believe that it's usually, you can see that I'm just using very, very little top spin, side spin. I'm just going to kind of wing it more than anything. I'm going to try to keep it relatively controlled. I don't think I need to max this out or anything. I'm just trying to kind of land it in the center of the fairway and then just kind of curl it back to kind of hold it on its line. Now, I don't always recommend going this way. You won't see me go this way very often. So if you watch my channel, you'll see that I go over towards the left. In fact, I think we went over to the left in the other guide. So you might want to check Tour Part 1, because I think and this is the way that I typically play it, is I'll hop it right on the middle to left side here, and then just lay it up here for a nice sniper approach. However, if we get an easy win like that where I can get just a little bit closer and kind of change my line, this can also, you know, be beneficial, because one of the things that this has a problem, into a headwind, it actually becomes almost not holdable whatsoever. You just have to basically, you just have to lay up in that case, and there's no way of knowing if we're going to get that wind or not. But what I typically try to do is kind of land center to left center there and just do this. Just kind of nicely bends over, especially with that wind effect. You can see you don't even need to curl it. Oftentimes I will curl it. However, when I have the wind effect helping me, I won't have to. And again, as I mentioned, you know, you can see that I can get up here a little bit closer. I may even go at this with the Goliath here towards max. So 5.4, this type of wind, 3-ish rings towards max. Might as well. So again, it is still really, really tough to make. Don't get me wrong. See with what I'm doing with my guide, thinking maybe about 3 rings from here. Perfect ball. Being able to get up this close just kind of gives you just a little bit of advantage. But you can see, you know, still playing that ball guide offset, especially up the hill into the wind, it's really going to make the ball cut to the left. And that's what you could see happening there. So it really takes like an extra level of visualization of the shot, because very, very challenging to get onto the... but as I mentioned, if we get a win like this, and you can see my opponent is using a Wind 4 ball, which will help slightly. And also the wind was probably towards the tour minimum here, probably like 8 miles per hour, very, very small. It's very, very lucky wind, because I had my opponent had 15 miles per hour even with this direction, you know, being able to reduce it to 9, 10 miles per hour, it's going to be kind of a bear of a shot. And, you know, more of a, you really can't get aggressive here. You can see that pretty much no matter what you do, it's going to kind of roll out towards the left. It's very, very tough to get aggressive there and hold that when you get a headwind. So that's one of the reasons that, you know, if I get the opportunity which presents itself to kind of take it up there and drive it a little bit longer, may be worth it. So just something to be thinking about. But do check out my channel for the other shot as well. So let's see what we can do on this one. This is a tough, tough hole. Of course I go first. So very, very tough shootout. What I'll typically do, I used to do this layup here a lot. This is a very, very tough hole for this is a very, very tough wind for the rough bump shot. So this might be the one time that I pull this out. Now I might just wing this more than anything. You can see that I'm going to try to keep the ball guide maybe just a little bit past the hole, kind of like this. I'm going to play kind of close to 1 per ring here with some curl, maybe just a little bit more. So that's 8 some rings and a little bit of curl. I do expect with the headwind it to kind of help to bring it to cut kind of naturally. It looks like I missed my landing zone a little bit. I landed 2 on the right side of the center, so it didn't make it over to the hole. Had I landed just a little bit more left there, had I actually landed up here, for whatever reason, a lot of times when you curl, it ends up landing a little bit more right, and that's what happened there. So when I curled towards the hole, it landed more right, and I missed the wrong side of that slope, and that's why I couldn't get it over there far enough. So a little bit of a miscalculation by my part. May be able to lose this one because I didn't get aggressive enough with my setup. But here's more or less what I was doing. I forget what the exact wind was. I think it was like 7.4. But I was pulling up towards max. Of course, I wasn't going to get up there, but this is kind of like what I had in mind for what I was just doing there. Maybe, you know, 60, 70% club. And this also is landing very right, but you'll see my opponent actually curled it harder. So if you curl it harder with more right, you can see that you actually, if you land on that, but let's say hypothetically my opponent landed on the left side of the fairway there, that would have been way too much curl. So you really do got to be careful with that. But you can see I pretty much gave that one away. And again, you know, going first really cost me on that one because I could have played, you know, a little bit more of my opponent. And I could have, you know, learned something from their shot. You can see that both of our shots did that. You know, we started kind of towards the center. Both of those balls landed to the right. All my opponent tried to do was try to copy my shot and get it to land right and then just curled it harder. That's all he did. So, wow, this is really getting annoying. I'm really sick of all these double holes that we keep playing. So what I can do for this one, I can actually back down to the quarterback. So what this is going to do, it's going to give me the accuracy that I want. You typically have to stay below 1 on the top spin. And as I mentioned, you know, I'll typically try to land left center here. There's a divider line. You can see a hill. Anytime you land over here, it's a little bit tougher. So what I'm going to do, pull maybe about 8 rings. And then what I'll typically do is curl it over towards the side, towards more of the mid of the fairway. So that's what I'm doing here. So you'll get this hole 2 straight, you'll get to see 2 different shots for this hole. And much easier to do with the quarterback for that shot. And this is a very, very risky shot. A lot of ways this goes in the water. I don't suggest doing this at all in pretty much any situation. You have to land this perfectly. So there you can see it didn't. He got very, very lucky. He was, you know, a couple feet from getting that in the water. And again, with the headwind, this is going to be very, very tricky shot. You know, I already kind of mentioned this. It's very, very tough to get aggressive on this line. You can try to kind of cut this angle and maybe do some overpower, but it's going to be a risky line. So if I was to be using notebook here, for example, I need to be looking at about 10 rings, and I'm going to need to do that. I'm not going to have 10 rings to add, so I'm going to have to use some power, maybe just a little bit of curl. And with the great ball, that's going to take me out anyway. But, you know, what I'd rather do is just kind of play it safe than sorry. So you'll see that I'm going to at least make sure that I hopefully keep it over the bunker to begin with anyway. So very, very, I try to play as casual as I can to be as safe as possible. And this, especially with a spit 4, not going to be the easiest of shots. It's tough to get this on the green. You're going to have to get kind of aggressive towards the right edge here because you can't curl it enough. Otherwise, you know, my opponent's going to probably have some kind of pitch from the fairway. So you'll want to be careful with where you get something like this because you don't want to throw away your opportunity at birdie. And here you can see a good ball, so let's just see how it plays out. Actually, probably better than whatever he was going to try to do, unless he was intentionally, you know, trying to good ball that. But as I mentioned, you know, you do need to kind of get it up there pin high, which it looks like he did. And, you know, that'll make things a lot easier because, you know, it won't be difficult at all to make that pitch from there. But if you know, so many things can go wrong. You know, the fairway's very crooked there. So just hitting kind of the wrong spot could potentially, you know, kick it over towards the left and into the left rough there, especially with the wind pointed left. So just things to be, you know, thinking about, considering. This is a tricky hole here. So I did get this one in part 1 a couple times. It's a tricky wind as well. A little bit of a tailwind. Typically don't use elevation here. I will be kind of somewhere up in here, maybe 80% club or so. But I'm also going to be moving down into the sand, and that's what makes this hole so, or this wind so challenging right here. So I'm going to try to land up here on the flat if I can, and then just curl it. Which means I'm going to have to underpull my rings because I'm moving down significantly. So I'm going to underpull my rings and I'm going to curl it. And the great ball cost me. So you can see with where that landed, just not good at all. As I mentioned though, when you move down into the lower, you saw I moved 5.5 rings, and you could see with how many rings I went, it was still probably too much. Or it was very, very close, because you could see I hit more of this downslope. So anytime you move down into that bunker, you really got to underplay these rings significantly. That's why I only went 5-some rings. I really didn't want that great ball, though. I needed to get that up on that flat. So as I mentioned, you have to kind of intentionally underplay these. It's very, very challenging. And the way that my opponent did that with the zoomed out camera makes it even tough. It makes it even tougher. There's a lot of things that can go wrong here. But you can see, you know, I essentially threw that one away, going first. So unlucky there. Kind of got in a slide here. I'm thinking about doing one more because I need one more pin chest. So just do one more hole here for you guys, and we'll just kind of throw this off. But I put myself in a two-game slot, you know, a two-game slide here just by not executing the shootouts. So, you know, it just really comes down to, you know, always being very smart with the way that you're going around. We got a very, very tough wind, and it's very tough going first on that wind too, because you know, there's no bar set. I don't know where my opponent's going to hit it. If I know where he's going to hit it, I can change the way that I played the shot. However, I need to stay somewhat aggressive and make sure that I don't roll down that hill on the left. And, you know, I need to make sure that I put it up there on the green to give myself a shot. And as soon as I hit that great ball, I essentially took myself out of that one. So let's take a look here. Another hole that we could go quarterback if we wanted, but there's kind of an alternate way to play it as well. With this wind, we should be able to launch it. Go up here, play it about 5 rings or so. Right around here, 5 rings. You can see that it's plenty to land into the fairway. Very, very little topspin. Very, very little curl. Just try to land somewhere towards the center-ish of the fairway and just get it up here for a pitch. So you can see that I actually aggressively got it down here. What I'll typically do if I can get it aggressively on that line and get it that far, I may go for the dunk here. So you can see opponent has a Spitfire. This is, again, you know, another situation where Spitfire would be a good club. But as I mentioned, you know, I didn't expect to hit it in the, you know, bunker at all. So that's why I didn't make the switch. But you can see how power can be a good thing. You've seen now 2 or 3 bunker shots for my opponents. They all have Spitfires on. Had they had Malibus on, they could potentially take themselves out of these holes. However, with Spitfire, you're not going to take yourself out of the hole. Now, however, I might still earn this win because I can still make my shot. So it's kind of going to be up to me to just kind of win this match right here. And what I'll typically do is maybe go for the dunk with a, and I'll probably try to set up my spin to maybe still have a chance to go in. You can see when I'm in here this tight, that's typically the way that what I'll try to do is a dunk. The only thing that I'll need to try to do is maybe get the spin wind effect down so you can see with how I'm kind of aiming. I'm going to play maybe just 3.75-ish per ring, somewhere right around here. 2.5 rings here. Just go for the dunk. If it misses, I'm okay as long as I don't hit the stick dead on with the miss. And you can see perfect ball. Should give me a very, very... Oh, wow. What did that hit? Did that hit the stick? The side of the stick? It looked like it was perfect line. It looked like it hit the stick. It looked like it hit the stick and didn't go in. That's what it looks like. It looked like it hit the top, like right here, and then bounced up. It looks like I had that dunk perfect, and it just didn't go in. So that's okay. We'll go to shootout. It looks like, yeah, I'm sure we're at an hour now. So I'm just going to cut this off after this. See if we can't get one more new hole. It'd be nice. Oh, this one again. There's so many duplications. So it looks like we got the same wind too. Almost the exact same wind. So let's see if I can't learn from my mistake here. As I mentioned, you know, it's going to be much better if you can... You know, even better if you can keep it out of going too low. If you can get it to land up here, that's even better. Because then there's no threat of putting it down in that bunker and you don't have to worry about it under adjusting. So, you know, going second on this one's going to have its advantage. As I mentioned, you can see that he's still keeping it up high. So you're going to be able to use a lot of that full adjustment. So if you guys want to know what the ring adjustment I'm going to do, you know, it's going to be very, very similar to what we just did. It's going to be very, very similar to what we just did. So I'm not even going to punch it in. Now, of course, I'm just going to, try to jack up the spin, and I'm just going to try to, more than anything, play my opponent. I can see where my opponent is, and I'm just going to stay away from going down into that low ground. So you can see that I'm going to play it up here, and then I'm just going to curl it. This is going to be much safer. I might not get it as close towards the hole. However, I know I'm going to beat 8 yards. So I'm just trying to, play strategy here to make sure that I don't put it down too much in that bunker to where it hooks too much. You can see I still had some hook on that, which means it still landed short. It landed short because I was still moving to kind of a little bit lower ground. So you almost need to pull at a slight angle, because had that landed a little bit more north and more away from the side slope, it would have still actually kicked towards the hole. You can see the way my shot came in, it still came in and checked up. So you can see that it didn't quite get to the hole, and the biggest reason is because I was still moving to slightly lower ground. Now it wasn't as significant, but since I'm moving kind of the target down a little bit into the low, it actually ends up landing short of where you originally set up, and that's why it took too much of that hill and started to hook towards the right, is because I hit too much of that face, not up on the top. So good luck with that hole, guys. Very, very tough to get through with those last 2 wins we just got there. Much easier to have Guardian for that hole, but you can't bring Guardian to this tour for 1 hole. But if I had Guardian, I would have been able to put both of those shootouts to a yard. 2 yards with Guardian. All you have to do is land it right on the front fringe, full backspin, and play the wind effect, 2 yards. It's an easy peasy hole with Guardian, but as I mentioned, you can't bring Guardian to that tour for just 1 hole. Good luck with your Tour 10 progress, guys. Let me know how it goes, and I'll see you guys next time later for some more guides. Good luck.